What we want to do moving forward is look at how we can build our natural immunity, but do it in a way that's gentle, that doesn't overstimulate, that is not provoking and forcing our immune systems to extreme reactions. So I'm asking that you develop more of a feminine approach to improving your immunity. Any herbs that have an aromatic smell are rich in volatile oils, and volatile oils by nature are a chemical compound found in plants which are antibacterial, often antimicrobial, meaning that they can work against a large number of different types of pathogens. And in Ayurveda, there isn't just this concept of physical immunity, there's also psychological immunity. Everything that you see and smell and hear and taste, and even everything that you feel through your emotional field, all of this is feeding your body these impressions. And these impressions can be pleasurable, they can be enlivening, sometimes though they can be detrimental and they can weaken us. Hi, I'm Sulin Sze, and this is the Well Woman podcast. I've worked with countless women and teenage girls over the years as a natural women's health clinician, and I know how hard it can be to get the help you need to overcome hormonal imbalance, infertility, and perimenopausal symptoms. I bring together my expertise in natural medicine and nutrition with insights from experts in the field of women's wellness to help you get the information you need to make a real difference to your health. This truly unique podcast combines the wisdom of the East with the clinical know-how of modern naturopathy, offering a holistic approach to empower and inspire women just like you on the path to optimized health. I'm your trusted guide as you navigate your hormone healing journey, giving you support, accountability, and guidance along the way. Thanks for listening in, and don't forget to follow or subscribe. It's time to nourish you with Well Woman. Hi everybody, today I'm talking about building immunity naturally. How do we buffer ourselves from pathogenic infection? How do we stay strong and resilient and healthy? It's a little bit of a departure from hormones, but hopefully it's going to be really helpful for you to boost your immune system. The immune system is a defense system. It's intimately connected to your psychological state, to your emotions, and it's fueled by your general level of health. It operates in a number of ways. We have our immediate retaliatory style response with innate immunity. So if you've heard this term, innate immunity, that's what it's referring to. You come into contact with some sort of pathogen and your body retaliates, and we try and knock it over. Whatever bug has entered our system, we're trying to basically knock that bug down. And then there's another type of immunity called adaptive immunity. And this is where in our bodies we generate, over time with exposure to these sorts of bugs and pathogens, we develop these antibodies. We build them ourselves actually. And those antibodies are there to trigger our memory in case that bug ever comes along again. And it gets built up in our repertoire of defense tactics, if you like. Whatever the type of immune response that you're having, one of the primary mechanisms your body will employ to fight the pathogen or the bug is inflammation. That's really important to remember. You know, over the past few years, I'm sitting now in 2023, we've been through the COVID pandemic. We've been told repeatedly that we're under attack, and our bodies and our cells, they have been listening. And if we're under attack, what do? We retaliate. We armor up. Sometimes we overreact. So the inflammatory style responses that many of us are experiencing in our bodies, particularly if we have a condition known as long COVID, or if we've just had COVID, you'll notice that you have more of an inflammatory nature at that time. If you do happen to have inflammatory style symptoms, mast cell symptoms, so this could be skin irritation, gut problems, gut pain, issues with gluten. It could be mast cell symptoms such as watery eyes. You could be developing rosacea, just all sorts of inflammatory conditions. Pain is in there as well. So you might notice that you are experiencing more of those types of symptoms, and you could potentially link it to some recent infection that you've had, including conditions like COVID. There are links emerging in the research as well between chronic inflammatory diseases like long COVID, post-exertional malaise, and conditions like multi-system inflammatory syndrome, where, according to the University of Queensland, they found that this multi-system inflammatory syndrome after COVID was popping up in children. It was rare, but what it actually did was it made the body fight itself. So it's just that next level of inflammation occurring in the body. And it speaks to the impact of the pandemic at a cellular level and what it's really meant to our bodies physiologically. Conditions characterized by a so-called protective inflammatory response like this, they're becoming more prevalent. I'm seeing more and more of it in clinic as well. I can really only speak from my own experience over the past few years, but something I've noticed in the socials, in communities, on Facebook, in our own families and friendship groups as well. Some of us were fighting each other or having disagreements, and it got quite heated. I really think the past few years have had a feeling of psychological warfare. Not all bad, not all terrible, but very impactful. And there's an urgency that's being created in us as a result. So moving forwards, for all of your beautiful bodies, all of the women and the girls listening to this podcast, what we want to do moving forwards is look at how we can build our natural immunity, but do it in a way that's gentle, that doesn't overstimulate, that is not provoking and forcing our immune systems to extreme reactions. So I'm asking that you develop more of a feminine approach to improving your immunity. We can use gentle herbs. We can use those herbs at gentle doses. We can integrate herbs into our food and teas, and we can start to live a lifestyle that gently, on a daily basis, improves our immune resilience. We can even look at our home environments and remove triggers that are keeping our immune systems in a reactive mode. Great example of this is mold. My approach to building immunity is to focus on nourishing body fluids, because a lot of immune pathogens and the chemicals that fight those pathogens, the cells that eat them up, the phagocytic cells, they are all traveling through the fluids, through the lymph and through the blood and so on, but particularly through the lymph. So nourishing the body fluids and making sure that hydration is really good is number one. And also nourishing tissues and building vitality, because stronger bodies means more resilience. And we want to feel more resilient and strong rather than feeling more activated, alert, and angry. And I say angry more in a physiological sense because that's the character of inflammation. So let's go to these two types of immunity in our bodies. Innate and adaptive immunity. They're interconnected components of your immune system, and they're working together to fight pathogenic infection. Innate immunity is immediate and rapid. So this is the one that was retaliation. It was your first line of defense. It's about boundaries and how strong your defenses are. It begins with things like your skin barrier. Your skin barrier should ideally be nice and healthy and robust so that the pathogens don't get in the first place. The mucous membranes in your throat, in your gut, in your mouth, they're important as well because, again, they're providing a barrier to those pathogens to try and stop them from getting in the first place. And it's also about all of the cells that attack, envelope, and digest pathogenic bacteria or viruses, like your white blood cells. So the next time you pop along to your GP and you get your blood test done, you'll notice that in a standard blood test, you'll get information about your red blood cells, and then you'll also get some data about your white blood cells, the neutrophils, the eosinophils, and so on. This is what I'm talking about here. So it's those white blood cells, how healthy they are, how many you've got, and that sort of thing. So all of those things, skin barrier, mucous membranes, gut lining, pathogenic bacteria, white blood cells that can fight them, they're all sorts of things that are involved in that innate immunity response. Inflammation is part of the process. So is phlegm and snot, coughing and sweating through fever. So all of those are aspects of trying to push the infection out of the body. So in Chinese medicine, they have a very sophisticated approach or model of pathogenic invasion. And they have various types of ways that pathogens can affect the body and get inside the body. Very commonly, it's relating to too much wind, so exposure to wind, and that brings the pathogens in, which makes perfect sense because you're breathing in the pathogens. They're going into your mouth and they go down into your gut and so on. In many cases, that's how it will happen. But they also have other ways, other characteristics, I guess, of those pathogens. Phlegm and snot are reactions. So if you're getting a lot of phlegm and a lot of snot, think about what it is that you're bringing into your body that your body is inflaming itself against. Often it's things like dairy, cheese. It's coming in through the food that we're eating, but we're not quite aware that our body's not tolerating it well. So if you do have lots of phlegm and all the time you're going, that is a really good indicator that something in your diet is creating way too much phlegm. It's creating dampness in your internal environment, those sorts of things, moving into some of the more Chinese medicine terminology there. So we've got coughing. Coughing and the cough reflex is one of the best ways our bodies can remove pathogens. And the cough reflex needs to be good. It needs to work well in the first stages of any sort of flu or cold infection, because as soon as you cough the pathogens out, it stops them going down well into the lungs, because you don't really want them to get down that far. As naturopaths, we will often talk about mucus and the mucus that a person is producing. That gives us some indications as to how deeply the pathogen has penetrated. And once you start getting green mucus and green phlegm, it's definitely a deeper penetration. So we will look at things like that as telling us whether the cough reflex was successful or not in the beginning. And fever is another great way, not necessarily to sort of force the pathogens out, but to sweat them out. So not only are the pathogens then damaged or injured by the heat created by the fever also opens the pores through the skin and helps the pathogens, or helps us to remove the pathogens through our skin. If you're wondering, how would you nourish your innate immunity so that you can live a healthy lifestyle and know that you're doing everything to prevent infection at that first defense level? Number one, vitamin D is absolutely essential. Make sure that you've got a good level of vitamin D. If you're not sure, get your vitamin D level checked. If you happen to be low, take a D supplement. Take it at a high dose. I'm not going to tell you exactly how much to take, but your naturopath or your practitioner will be able to do this for you. If you're a woman in your 40s, mid-40s and onwards, try to get a D3 plus K2. So this is where you get the vitamin D in combination with the potassium that helps your bones to absorb calcium. So that's quite important. And the other thing is vitamin C. Vitamin C is one of those vitamins that can never do as much harm. If you take too much, you just pee it out. Fantastic. So take as much vitamin C as you like and have an orange a day, eat a kiwi fruit a day. There are lots of native foods as well in Australia that are rich in vitamin C. Pretty much any fruit that's orange or red in color is going to give you some vitamin C. And take your vitamin Bs. So in terms of your vitamins, it's like your essential vitamin kit would have a D in it, a C, and a selection of vitamin Bs. Some of the herbs that you can use really vary on the stage of infection that you're at. So if it's flu and you're in those very initial stages, you can usually take most herbs. Just be a little bit careful if you're getting a lot of those inflammatory style symptoms. That's where I like to really tailor the treatment for my clients. So if I find that they're getting a lot of inflammatory symptoms, I'll really steer away from some of the more provoking herbs, the masculine style herbs, and I go more to the feminine. And if it's just early stages of a cold or something like that, I'll pretty much give anything really, anything that works with immunity and helps to boost it. Because when you're a herbalist or naturopath like me and you're putting together your herbal blends, you can always balance out the herbal blend. So I'll give a mixture of immune herbs and I'll give some other supportive herbs in there, either to help with their absorption or to help them work better. Some of my favorite herbs for immunity include echinacea and astragalus. So they're probably my two favorites. I do have others. There's another herb that I use a lot called mullein. I use that in more respiratory style infections. And then there are other herbs that I use more for gastrointestinal infections. I do really like astragalus, and I think it has a very good reputation for good reason. It's a lovely tonic for the body and safe to use more longer term. And give your body good quality raw materials to work with. So think about everything you eat and drink and rub on your skin is helping you to build the tissues, bones, the fluids, and thus the immune system. So eat good, healthy foods, clean diet. You kind of know there's lots of fruit, lots of vegetables. Try to cook without adding too much oil. Try to avoid fried and fast foods. Avoid sugars or adding sugar to your food. And then also avoid late nights and stress and anything that makes you feel overwhelmed or stressed. And I've talked about this concept of avoiding stressful data. So this is like what you're watching, what you're listening to. So if you're watching really violent movies, listening to things that make you feel stressed, for some of us, to be honest, this is listening to the daily news. So whatever is causing you a feeling of tension, overwhelm, or stress, try to limit that if you're fighting an infection, because the last thing you need is to exacerbate your psychological stress. Your body is already in a stress state because it's fighting this infection. So adaptive immunity was the second type of immunity that I mentioned before, and it's very pathogen specific. What I mean by that is your body will produce these antibodies to specific pathogens, thinking that, well, this time we missed the boat, but next time if this pathogen comes back again, I am going to knock it down with this antibody. So your body develops these antibodies over time. So it does take a little bit of time to build up that adaptive immunity. But this is the reasoning behind allowing your children to play in the dirt and get a little bit dirty sometimes, not to be too hyper-hygienic, because what you're trying to do is create the adaptive immunity and also teach the immune system it's okay to get triggered. If you're too clinically clean all the time, then the immune system becomes less able to deal with the provocation of an infection. So in a way, your body is going to make a physical note of any pathogens that you're exposed to, and next time around, you're going to come back prepared, you'll be ready to attack. And in a way, it's like collecting data on your enemies. It's being informed about your enemies. It's intelligence, basically. In adaptive immunity, you produce antibodies to these pathogens. They act like a dedicated task force, and they take the pathogens down when they reappear to make your healing process faster and more effective. It means that it might take longer initially to mount an effective response to infection, but it becomes very targeted and it gives you more protection next time around. So the best ways to nourish this adaptive immunity are to allow your body to get a realistic amount of exposure to a variety of pathogens in the first place, more so when you're young and you're more robust. Not over-sterilizing your living spaces and spending time in nature a lot. So sitting on rocks, sitting on the ground, as long as you're not exposed to anything dangerous, such as ticks. We get a lot of ticks here in the northern beaches. But, go to the beach and putting your fingers in the sand, those sorts of things, just allowing your body to process and get exposure to things that are a little bit foreign and unusual. Your naturopath or herbalist can prescribe something as well to suit your constitution. So I will often do mixes in preparation for clients if they want to have something in the cupboard just in case they catch a flu or a cold. They can just pull it out of the cupboard when they need it. So that's a great way to be prepared. And have a look at your living environment and clean the walls, clean the ceiling. Mold and those sorts of things can be a bit of an issue for your immune system. I mentioned before a little bit about different conceptions of the immune system and pathogens, and this becomes very nuanced when you compare major healing systems. In Chinese medicine, they have the concept of an external pathogenic factor or external pernicious influence. It comes in a variety of forms. It could be wind, cold, dry, or damp. It can be heat. It could be even strong heat called summer heat. And if your body and your blood and fluid and energy levels are adequate, then your body's usually in a good place to fight off those types of infections. But if not, the focus then comes down to nourishing and tonifying you to get you to this point where you can fight off an infection. They call it the Wei Qi. So it's a force of protection. It's a little bit more superficial in the body, but it's working intelligently to push the pathogens out. And it's also about creating harmony in the body internally, called the internal landscape. So it's much about creating harmony within as it is about pushing the pathogen out. In naturopathy, we see it really differently, actually. In some ways, there might be similarities between the characteristics of the pathogens. They're just described different ways. So in Chinese medicine, you might be talking about a pathogen that has more heat, whereas we might be talking about a pathogen that's very inflammatory. We often make connections between the immune system and the gut, the nervous system as well, and the lymphatic system. So we look at those four systems, immune, gut, nervous, and lymphatic system. And we focus a lot on how they're interacting with each other and what their functional level is. So if you've ever heard the term functional medicine, we're trying to work to get the function of these particular systems in the body to its optimal level. And then we look at how healthy the microbiome is, because that's part of our foundational health. We've got microbiome basically everywhere. So we've got it in the skin, we've got it in the mouth, we've got it in the gut, of course. We've got it in the reproductive tract, the vagina, and so on. And we look at the immune system as being very dynamic, very responsive, and being made up of all these different tissues and cells, and the microbiome is part of that. We also think with the immune system that it's not a machine. It's very responsive to its environment, so it could swing either way. It could be going into underactivity and not performing very well, which means that probably we're run down and we're not nourishing ourselves enough to build those tissues and fluids, so we're more susceptible to getting infections. The other way it can go is into overdrive, and it can cause a lot of reactivity, inflammation and pain come from that. Sometimes it causes long-lasting damage. This is where we're talking about autoimmune disease. We like looking as well at the chemistry of immunity, so naturopaths will investigate flora, they'll look at histamine overactivity, we look at the mucous membranes that line our bodies on the inside, all as being keys to our immune health. In Ayurveda, all treatments will be individualized to the constitution, and while naturopathy does have some level of constitutional typing, the Chinese do it really well. I think Ayurveda is fantastic at constitutional typing, so working out which body type you might have and therefore which predispositions to disease you might have. And in Ayurveda, because it's such a lifestyle health system, there's an emphasis on living and eating right, but for your type. And there isn't just this concept of physical immunity, there's also psychological immunity. Everything that you see and smell and hear and taste, and even everything that you feel through your emotional field, all of this is feeding your body these impressions. And these impressions can be pleasurable, they can be enlivening. Sometimes, though, they can be detrimental and they can weaken us. So in Ayurveda, they'll really look at how is the lifestyle nourishing the immune system and the general health overall. Meditation, regular bathing, having daily rituals, eating well, and being calm also. Having a positive outlook, seeing things in nature, looking at birds and trees. All of these are ways to feed and nourish our health. And Ayurveda uses a lot of spices too. I was just thinking of this this morning, actually, when I traveled to India. I've been to India a few times, and I'm always kind of blown away by how spicy the food is. And then I realized that those spices are there for a reason. You know, they're quite protective, they're medicinal. And yes, I am meant to sweat when I eat that food. So I really, due respect to the spices. I really understand, why the food is so spicy. I think there are some other reasons as well, but that would require a little bit of research. So to improve your natural immunity and resistance to infection, I'm going to give you some tips here. These are things that you can take away with you today and you can start work on right now. So number one, get more vitamin C. Vitamin C you can find in citrus fruits like lemons and oranges and kiwi fruit. So they're really great sources of vitamin C. We always think of oranges for vitamin C, but kiwi fruit are really, really high. Get some vitamin D from the sunshine. So get yourself outdoors and feed your body positive impressions and get yourself some fresh air, exposure to pathogens in a gentle way. So many ways that going outside can help our immune system. Also, you can get vitamin D from oily fish, nuts and seeds like walnuts, almonds, and pepitas. And eat berries. Berries are really rich in antioxidant compounds. They're really good for us. So any berries that are dark, including fruits like cherries can be really good for us and boost our immunity too. And cook with immune boosters like ginger, turmeric, and garlic. So see where you can work those into your diet. If you haven't seen my website article or blog recipe for butter beans, go and have a look for them. They're a turmeric curried butter bean, delicious dish and really fantastic for boosting immunity. And drink teas that are aromatic, because any herbs that have an aromatic smell are rich in volatile oils. And volatile oils by nature are a chemical compound found in plants which are antibacterial, often antimicrobial, meaning that they can work against a large number of different types of pathogens, whether they be viral, bacterial, protozoal, fungal, and so on. Thyme, peppermint, sage, and lavender are really great examples there. Eat some yogurt to diversify your gut flora, and at the first sign of a cold, make yourself a turmeric latte. Also know that papaya, the fruit, contains papain, which is really good for immune function. And the next time that you're cooking a soup or a stew, throw in some shiitake mushrooms, maybe even move into some of the medicinal mushrooms like maitake. So you could have medicinal mushroom lattes and that sort of thing. If it happens to be winter, you can improve your lung function on top of boosting your immunity by having onion, garlic, zucchini, cauliflower, and broccoli. And these are really fantastic for the lungs. If you think about also just the design of the cauliflower and the broccoli, they do look a little bit like lungs. And that comes from the doctrine of signatures, which we use in naturopathy and they use in Chinese herbal medicine as well. Eat more spinach, tomatoes, and asparagus. And to nourish and build your external defense system, your skin, take a high-quality fish oil supplement, not a cheap one. Go get yourself a really good quality one, or come and see me. I can give you really great quality products. And also protect your skin from dryness and cold in the winter. I hope this has been really useful for you and given you lots of tips and information on what you can do to boost your immunity today. Have a fantastic day, and thank you so much for listening, everybody. Don't forget to follow and subscribe, and I'll see you soon in another episode of Well Woman. Hey everybody, please note that the information, opinion and advice provided in this podcast are not intended to replace professional medical care. They are for general information and educational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast may not always be those of the host. Thanks for listening.